Bazaar Durrani. Currently, we're here in the beautiful Charles Van Sandwick store in the heart of downtown Vancouver in the historic Gastown district. Joining me is someone who I'm so excited to have on the show today. He's taking a little breaky break from work right now. Works around the corner. He's the head of the acting department at the Vancouver Film School. He is a fantastic actor, a playwright, and someone who I've known for quite some time, and I'm so excited to have him join us today to talk about his career, his work over the years, transitioning from acting on camera to voice acting as a playwright, and everything in between. Omari Newton, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, great to have you here. Vancouver Film School, wow, the head of acting department. That's kind I mean, if we go like 22 decades ago, I would have never imagined you as like the head of acting department. And here you are.
Life is wild. Life is wild in some ways. I mean, although it's interesting, I started off acting in theater, and I actually moved to Vancouver around when we met. It's probably back in 07, 08, probably, around then. But I moved out here specifically to act in film and television, which, as you know, I did for about a decade. But the whole time, when I was pursuing a career both in theater and film and TV, I did teach and I did coach actors.
I never knew that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it started off kind of coaching friends with auditions, and then there was a time where I taught kids acting, and I'd always been passionate about arts education as well as the arts. So it kind of is a natural progression if I look at it in that regard, but I never thought I would be the head of the acting department. It just sort of worked out that way.
With everyone who comes on the show, I like to start from the beginning. You know, I like to backtrack a little bit. I know, like, over the years, we run into each other, and I love to ask people how they got started. When did you know you were meant to perform? That this is the career path you were going to choose? And did you have any sort of feedback that you received from your family? Any questions, concerns? Are you sure you want to be an actor? From my family, there were things such as, become a legal assistant or a dental assistant, at least something with a regular income and job,
benefits.
And then and other stuff you can do on the side.
Yeah, I'll give you my Marvel villain origin story.
Oh, please do.
It's not a villain, it's an origin story. So when I was a kid, I was born with polyps on my vocal cords. I don't know if you know what that is, but like singers get them sometimes. Like I think Adele had to cancel a tour once because she had polyps on her vocal cords. And it's when you have these growths on your vocal cords, and as a result, I had a really raspy voice. So when I was a kid, I had like one of these voices like this, and I would lose my voice all the time. And I used to get bullied and I get teased when I was young. I'm talking like 4, 5, 6 years old. And they used to call me horse mouth because I would go hoarse. My voice would go hoarse all the time. And I always loved acting, I loved performing, but because I had this kind of strange voice, I could never really get good parts in the school plays. So I remember my first role, I was cast as a caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland. So I was like the ass end of the caterpillar in the back with no lines. So it was just all these kids walking around being caterpillar. I think one time I was also the tree who didn't speak. But then in grade 3, I had surgery to remove the polyps on my vocal cords, and it was successful. And it was like overnight, my voice went from this crackly kind of raspy thing to being more clear and being able to speak. But here's the Marvel villain origin story. I remember my school nurse at my elementary school said to me, "Oh, Omari, like your voice sounds so much better. It's like night and day. The surgery worked. Like you'll never be like an actor or a singer or anything, but at least now you can talk." Right?
And you're like, lady.
Well, grade 3 me, low key in my head was like, "You'll see," right? No, sorry, that was really more. But no, but I didn't think in a malicious way. But I remember being like,
I'm gonna prove you
"I'm
wrong.
gonna prove you wrong. I'm gonna be an actor." And I don't sing, but I don't know if you know this, but I used to rap. I was an MC for many years.
I saw that in your bio. I didn't know about that. No.
Yeah, I was in a band called Kobayashi. Our stuff is still on, I think it's on like YouTube, you can find some stuff. But we played Montreal Jazz Fest a couple times. It was an 11-piece acid jazz ensemble. And so think like the Roots back in the day. And I was an MC. So I I can't sing, but I did both work in music, and of course I've been a professional actor now for many years, so that nurse was wrong. That's all I
Maybe
gotta
you
say.
should look her up and send her. But you know, sometimes we need people like that.
Yeah.
I won't say which school, even though I did mention them in the episode prior. But I remember when I was in acting school, I did some classes around the corner. And several of my teachers, you know, I remember the feeling, it wasn't like they flat out said something to me, but making remarks around, oh, you just like look like, you know, more on my physical instead of like you could bring something to the table in that way. And when I had the launch of my first show, Life in Salazar, which I produced, you know, and it went on 4 networks, like nationally, and it was independently produced. And I made sure to like send them the invitation. And most of them were there.
Yes.
And one of them particularly sang. And then, you know, several of them I've seen on set other times. And she's like, I knew you were gonna do stuff. And I had Vancouver Sun there and Joy TV and this and that. And I got some like weird satisfaction. And I was like, okay. But maybe there was a reason that person was planted.
Sure.
You know, that they put the fire in your belly for you to be like. So what was it about performing? What was it about being on a stage, having an audience, being someone other than Omari or Omari as a character that appealed to you?
Well, first off, shout out to the haters out there. I agree with Zara. That's great motivation. From Tom Brady to Michael Jordan, haters are great to motivate you. So anybody watching, it's good. And for me, I was just always one of those kids who I had a really vivid imagination, and I had a lot of energy, to the point where I think at one point teachers or people at my school thought I had like ADD or ADHD, because I was one of those kids that would like sit in my chair and, you know what I mean, I would constantly be moving just while paying attention, so they thought something was off. But then I would like watch cartoons and try to do impersonations of the voices that I would see in the cartoons. Or I would play, you know, G.I. Joe with my friends, because this is like a little bit before video games and Nintendo, where you could actually play with physical G.I. Joes. But I would always never make the G.I. Joe characters the characters. I would create new characters and give them all voices and have like backstories. So I was just always full of energy and had an elaborate imagination and loved telling stories and playing make-believe. So when I started acting, it just came really organically to me. Like, it was just how I used to play for fun, so.
You're like being a kid and now you're like, oh my God, can I go to school for it, make money?
Sure.
You know, especially here in North America. Like, I grew up in Pakistan, so this was not something that, as a kid, that I ever imagined that I would pursue as a career that would help me make a living.
Yeah.
You know, as my mic falls.
I'll cover while you're putting your mic on. So interestingly, I actually never went to school to study acting formally. What happened was I was, in addition to all the other stuff, I was really into sports when I was a kid. And I used to play basketball, I used to play football. And I remember one year I quit football to focus on basketball and got cut from my basketball team. So I had this like big gap in my schedule because I wasn't playing sports. And my high school drama teacher, her name was Linda McKenty. She's since passed away, may she rest in peace. She was amazing. Linda McKenty convinced me to try out for the school play. And I remember it was Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. I played Benedict, did the play, and during one of the matinees in this high school play, there was 3 people in the audience, and one of them was an agent. And after the show, this agent came up to me when I was, I don't know, 16, 17, and he was like, have you ever thought about doing this for a living? And I didn't know at the time that there was an acting scene in Canada. I didn't really know about.
And this is in Montreal?
This was in Montreal,
okay.
Yeah, Beaconsfield High School back in the day. So I signed with my first agent when I was like 16 or 17 and started going to auditions. And then by age 19, I was cast as a lead in a play. So I got my start in the theater professionally, got my union card in the theater, and then became a TV actor after. Yeah.
Nice, and to have an agent at like 16 to 17, like wow.
Doing this a long time.
Long time. I was taking a look at your IMDb for someone who says that, oh yeah, I don't know about acting anymore. I'm like, wow, look at all this like voice stuff that you're doing. And you know, that was a big thing that I didn't know that was happening like in Vancouver. And like the fun of, I've like done this year some Walla stuff and some like dubbing, and when they want like South Asian or like Pakistani or Indian accent, or like, you know, more, thank goodness now they're bringing in people with like authentic, like, you know, Hindi or Urdu accents. And I was like, I did a thing with like Dave Patel, like for his first thing, but like seeing your work, I'm like, you were doing so much voice stuff. Like how is that, tell us like how is that voice different when you're doing the animation and building that character, you know, and making them different, because now no one's seeing you.
Right.
No one's seeing Omari. You can dress as whatever when you go in there. When I was on My Little Pony, like My Little One Day, and like all these people, they're so comfortable, no one's wearing makeup. I was the only weirdo who came in like, you know, and all these girls, they're in like onesies and in like their, people are so comfortable and having the time of their lives and making a pretty decent paycheck as well.
It's not bad.
So how did you transition into voice, and what is the building a character like for when you're doing it for this animated character voice?
Well, the biggest secret that I tell, I was in Calgary last week teaching voiceover workshops to high school students for the school. But the biggest secret of voice acting is it's just theater. Like animation, it's just theatrical style acting. The only difference is in a play, of course, the audience can see you, but you're giving the same performance for voiceover. And if you ever, I mean, I'm sure you notice when you watch in the voice booth, voice actors are very animated. Like you're not just standing by the microphone in neutral. You're moving and you're, you know.
And it was better in the beginning when I went in there. I felt very aware. And then I remember like Alistair was like, okay, just like give it to them, just like let it. And then the more I was like, wow, this is like fun. It's like,
Well, the thing is, you'll stand out more in voice if you're like very reserved. Because everybody's going, and I tell students like, if you ever look on YouTube at like Robin Williams behind the scenes in Aladdin, he's going crazy. Or Benedict Cumberbatch when he plays Smog, it's incredible. Like, and that's a full motion capture performance, so you really get into it. So that's the first secret, is that voiceover is just theater. And because I came from this pretty extensive theater background, when I moved to Vancouver, one of my first major gigs was Bard on the Beach, where I booked the role of Aaron in the play Titus Andronicus. And at the time, I had just signed with characters, who I'm still with now. Caroline Young. I think she might have been starting to build a roster back in like 2008. But I invited Caroline Young to come see me in the show because I was part of their principal agency, but I knew I wanted to break into voice. And because Caroline saw me on stage and heard my voice, she knew that I would be a good voice actor. And she's been my agent ever since. It's been almost 20 years I've been with Caroline, and I've just been working, growing those skills.
I was talking about the show Continuum with Ryan, and that was such a fantastic show with so many local actors, and a sci-fi show that is like really well done. It just sucks you in. You know, sometimes you have, like, I love sci-fi. Like, I grew up watching like sci-fi. I learned English by watching sci-fi and classic MGM TNT movies, and you know, because we literally got 2 channels in Pakistan. And this is like 10 million years ago. Continuum was so fantastic, and I had no idea you were in this show. And I'm like, that guy looks really familiar. Like, you know, it's like in these like gray overalls. I think they were gray. And then if there was some kind of like overalls. And you know, I'm like watching. I'm the type of person when I get into a show. When I really get into it, I watch it all night. Like I binge watch it, and your name pops up. And I was like, yes! I'm like, that face was familiar. That's Omari. I was like, that is so cool. I was so like proud of you. The fact that this is someone that I knew, like, you know, many years ago, and to see you find success and to be on screen. And you know, and you weren't being Omari, you know, because you were like, and with the computers and the glasses, and you were just, and there were I forget which episode because this is a while ago
Right.
that I watched it. Like I think it's been over a decade ago that
Sure,
I saw this.
sure.
And I remember there's one episode that is kind of more focused on your
Yes.
character. Either
Yes.
you go missing or
I
someone
escaped from a mental ward.
Yes.
I had an army of cockroaches. I know that one well, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And how was it working on that show? That's
Oh.
such a fantastic cast, and I love
Yeah.
the whole time sequence
Yeah.
stuff.
It was a dream come true. Honestly, it was, I mean, as you saw, I just saw Ryan, I haven't seen him in ages. It really was like a family.
And just so you know, Ryan
Yeah.
was just literally sticking around, even though we really didn't talk about it. He was sticking around to
Just
say,
to say hi.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
that's really
He
sweet.
came in all the way from
That's really
Squamish,
sweet.
and he
Well-
said, "That's Omari, right? Who's coming next?" And I was like, yeah.
Well, that was the vibe on set. And I think it's a couple things. I think one, like you said, it was a Canadian show. Because oftentimes, not all the time, but sometimes as Canadian actors, and there's so many talented actors in Canada, but often we get cast on American shows where like 1 through 7 on the call sheet are American.
And now you're Mike.
There we go. Got it. Yeah, if you get cast on an American show where 1 through 7 on the call sheet are American, and sometimes there's like a vibe or an attitude where they treat the Canadians like the hell. But this was a show that was created by not only a Canadian, but like a Vancouver resident. Shout out to Simon Barry, who was an amazing showrunner and great to work with. The cast was like top to bottom Canadian, largely local actors. And they were people who, I mean, other than me at the time, because that was one of my big breaks on TV, it was like a who's who of sci-fi in Canada. Like
Tamil kind of guy, like
Roger Cross, Lexa Doig, Tony Amendola, Ryan Robbins. So it was wild for me because I recognized all these people from TV. So I told Roger and I are friends now, but I remember the first day, I remember Roger from 24, and I sat down in the makeup chair, and Roger was sitting next to me, and it took me a while to like relate to him like a person, not just be like, oh my god, it's... So we just, and to the credit of the cast, like all of them from day one were so welcoming. Like literally, and I've said this before, but it's true, Lexa Doig, who has done a billion TV shows, like Lexa she's been on everything. Lexa literally, at the time I was like renting a studio in the West End, she literally found out I was like taking cabs to set and would pick me up and drive me to set. This doesn't happen. Like she was a big star, she'd done a bunch of stuff, but we hit it off, and she found out, like I think one day after set, I told her I was like waiting for a cab or whatever. She's like, oh, I'll give you a lift home. My cast member was fun, and sometimes she would come in early. Like her scene might not be late, she would come in early. So shout out Lexa Doig, like just a super solid human. Roger Cross, nicest guy ever. Even like Alex Ponovic just came to Vancouver Film School to talk to my students. I met him on that show. We still keep in touch. We're still friends. Ryan stuck around to say hi. Like it was a dream job, and we had 4 beautiful, amazing seasons. I got to go to Dragon Con. I got to go to Fan Expo Vancouver. Like I was living out a lot of childhood dreams on that show. So it's incredible.
And especially when it comes to that kind of make believe, where you're going back in time in the future, and I think that I can't think of the actor's name because him and his son were in the show, and he's kind of this guy who's sort of homeless, and he's talking to himself a lot.
Ian Tracy.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and they
Who's
filmed
another
it.
legend.
Yes, and
Yeah.
they filmed the scene around Gastown.
Yes.
Till then, I didn't know it was filmed here.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my god, because some of these people like Roger Cross and like I interviewed them before, and I was like, okay, another Canadian actor,
Sure.
but I
He's
didn't
not big
include.
Toronto.
I didn't
Sure.
include in that it's filmed here.
And the show was set in Vancouver. Like that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Like oftentimes Vancouver plays Seattle and New York. It was a show shot in Vancouver,
Vancouver,
that was playing Vancouver. So that was also really cool. Just not having to pretend we're in a different city.
And a lot of like locals shining, and something that is truly entertaining and captivating, like really sucks you in. It made me sad when I wasn't like, what do you mean? We're not going further. I want to keep.
Know.
Because
Oh,
I love those like anything that is sci-fi related
Yes.
to time,
Yes.
and when you're going back and into the future in different dimensions,
Yeah.
and this can also happen. But when it's written well and explained well, where you believe that yes, this can happen.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Simon's known to have incredible success. Like he's working on Warrior Nun now. He did a bunch of stuff. Like it was a really like the stars aligned in the writing, in the directing and the producing and the cast, and it was brilliant. Yeah.
And you worked on this show, I think, when we ran into each other at Chapters, and I was like seeing,
I think
there
so.
was a Blue Mountain.
Oh, Blue Mountain State.
Yes,
Yeah.
in Montreal, you were
Yes.
working on that, and
Yeah.
tell us about that experience.
That's a wild story. And I've told some people this story, and I was like, I feel like they didn't react appropriately to how wild of a story this is, but I'll explain. So, I am from Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
I moved to Vancouver when I was 26, but I'd been doing theater in Montreal, worked really hard, moved to Vancouver to pursue more film and TV. Started off a bit slow, was doing a bunch of extra work, then I booked that play, Tense Andronicus, and then I sent an audition tape from Vancouver to Montreal for this pilot for this fun TV show called Blue Mountain State. And I remember I had an in-person callback for this role on Blue Mountain State in Montreal. And I just happened to be going back to town because my niece was getting baptized, I think it was. So I happened to be going back to Montreal because I wouldn't have been able to afford flying back for a callback, but the director and producer were there. So I happened to be back in town, and I auditioned for this TV series, Blue Mountain State, and I ended up booking the gig, right? This was the pilot at the time. We didn't know it was going to go. Here's the part where it gets crazy, right? Booked the pilot, goes really well, pilot gets picked up, we go to shoot the series now. Awesome, right? So I show up to wardrobe, and I learn that we're shooting at my old school, at my old college. It's shot at John Abbott College, where I was a graduate, which is like 5 minutes from my parents' house, right, where I grew up. The uniform we're playing in, I used to play football back in the day. The uniform we're playing in is identical to the uniform that I used to play in when I lived in Montreal. My character plays the same position and wore the same number.
No.
I swear to God.
No.
And I've told people this story and they're like, oh cool. And I remember I told some castmates and they're like, oh cool. So what do you mean, oh cool?
It is a big deal.
It's insane.
This is manifesting in synchronicity at its finest.
But it was to the point, Zara, I swear to you, I thought I was being pranked. I thought that it was like an elaborate setup and they were pretending I booked a TV series.
Did you have like moments like this, like somebody pinching you, like you're on set and you're just like,
it was surreal.
Is this life? Like, so what do you think? How long did you work on that? Because I remember when you were posting about it, like through Facebook, you see people's success, and I was like, oh my God, this is so fantastic. Look at you up there. I think I was like at an airport or somewhere where, or in where I saw you on TV, and I was like, man, because I remember when we were doing background work on
Fantastic
Four, and then to see, because it's really great when you see people when they're getting started, which I feel like, from the beginning of your Vancouver training.
That was the beginning of my TV.
And then to see you in Continuum, and then you were posting about Blue Mountain, I was like, wow, because to me, I'm the type of person who believes that if someone I know has had this success or had found this, then that means I'm going to get, it's possible, and I will have some of this as well. Because then it means there's plenty of it to go around. I also,
Well,
so what was that whole experience like? Walk us through.
It was, actually, interestingly, Blue Mountain State came before Continuum, actually. That was my first big break on TV. And it was, again, like, knock on wood, it was a dream experience. Like, I just got really lucky. My character was the best friend of, like, the main guy, who's Alan Richardson, who I haven't seen in a while, but, like, he's a great dude. He's currently playing Jack Reacher on the Amazon series Reacher, but we were best friends on the show. Great dude, and I got to work with these, like, great Canadian and American actors. And it was really, like, my intro to acting in television. Like, because I didn't, at the time I did a lot of theater, but I kind of learned by watching them, and my character only had a couple lines per episode, but I was in a bunch of scenes. So I got to watch and learn and get some great punchlines in there and react. And the creators of the show, Eric Faulkner and Chris Romano, who goes by Romansky, were these guys who were like my age, these comedians from Boston, and we just really bonded. We're still friends to this day. Like, we were at a Canucks game last year, It was just one of those situations where I got very, very lucky, and it happened to run for 3 seasons, and then we did a movie.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Because you were like, I didn't do acting school or acting classes, I do theater. What do you say to your students who are like, well, Mr. Newton, you know, what advice would you have for us? Because like, why are we in class? Like, I would love to hear. I personally feel, for me, I'm an experiential learner. I'm not really a studious kind of person. I need to do the thing, fall on my face, make mistakes, break things, and learn that way. Everyone is a different kind of learner. It sounds like you have to experience and get into it yourself.
I would say this, right? You definitely don't have to go to school to have an acting career, but I wish I had a school like Vancouver Film School when I started, because I had to learn, and I joke about this, but it's through public failure and public humiliation, lick my wounds, regroup, and try again. Whereas if you're in school, all those big mistakes you make, all the not knowing what you're doing, spiking the lens and missing your mark, it's better to do that in a class where your teachers can adjust you, so by the time that you get to
Instead of on set, they're like, sir, what are you doing?
Dude, and when I started,
Tell us, can you share some stories with us?
Oh, I didn't know what I was doing. On Blue Mountain State, I had all this. I mean, obviously, I did something right. They kept me around, but I had all this energy, but just learning how to keep energy and stay in the scene while hitting the mark is something that you learn through watching other people who are really good at it. And I remember actually, my boy Darren Brooks, who was on Blue Mountain State. He's also an actor who was on The Bold and the Beautiful for years. He was a machine. Soap opera actors are machines, because they do an episode a day. The amount of dialogue they do. And I remember Darren was so good at hitting his mark, and he never dropped his lines, and he was just a machine. And just watching guys like that who had so much practice was the way that I got to learn. So that's what I would tell people. Yeah, you can learn on the job. It's just way more pressure, and the stakes are way higher. Because if you mess up badly on the job, they might not ask you back. If you mess up badly in the classroom, then that's what you're there to learn.
That's very well said. Something like that, season 4. And they're doing these master crane shots, and I'm just so in it because the executive producer was there, and it's all sand, you know, in Surrey, and so no one's coming to tell me stuff. They're yelling super far away, and I'm the only performer, and all this crew, and it's in the middle of the summer, super hot. I'm giving it all my emotions. My close up is at the end of the day.
Oh no! That's so classic. The classic. You were dead by the end.
And they're now, give us emotions. You're crying all day, in the heat. They can't even. And they gotten a stunt double for me, but I ended up doing my own falls because I could. And no one could come in the sand to give me water. So it's in like a day before my birthday in the summertime, and I'm just sweating so much. And because the kind of stuff they got me was just in case they had to pad me and stuff. So I'm just dying. So by the time 4 or 5 o'clock comes in after a full day, they're so close. I had nothing to give.
It's
I sadly. Was that was a bad lesson to learn. No one told me that in class.
And you know what? That's exactly the kind of thing that a good school, or a good class, right, will teach you. Is understanding when it's a wide shot, when it's a crane shot, when it's your close up. And the veteran actors, you want to be giving something every take, but you know that the money is when they're right here, right? But that's what you learn in school.
So I'm assuming tell us about your involvement. I mean, we'll jump back to your acting and your voice career, because I'm very fascinated about your voice work. And of course, your work as a playwright. I see you talk a lot about that on social media. But at film school, being the head of the acting department, can you speak to some of that experience, what that is like, and how you've made changes, and what are the students learning in class? Other than not to give all your emotions
on the wide shot. I mean, honestly, I feel I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. I feel very blessed because I feel my job as an acting educator is to be a mentor to the next generation of actors. And I love actors, and I love teaching. So I feel my job is to share insight into what they are going to expect out of the business. Right? And what I really, really have worked hard to do, and Vancouver Film School has long been a great school. my dear friend Jennifer Clement was the head of department before me for 15 years, and I'm there now. And I try to continue a legacy, which is creating a home for actors. Like, to me, I want it to be a safe place. I want it to be a place where people can take risks, but in a way that they know they feel supported. And I want it to be the type of school where 5, 10, 15, 20 years after people graduate, they come back and visit. If they need to use a room for self-taping or for recording, they can use it. Like, I really want to create a lifelong home for actors. So that's what we're working on.
Sounds like you're very, very passionate, and you're bringing in, all your friends from all the shows you've worked on, and and I think I like being in class with teachers or getting coached by teachers. Now that I have your number, I'll be like, hey, Omari, hi, I need to put this on tape. I love learning from people who are out there like doing the work. And like I've been in class with like both, but I think there's something truly remarkable when someone's out there, whether directing or writing, or they're just involved, where it's not just about, excuse me to say, collecting a paycheck. It's also about like you're creative, you're an artist, you're a performer, you're doing that, but you're also here teaching it because you love performing and the craft and creativity so much.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for me, it's like, and I have similar issues, especially when I was a young artist, with some of these people out there that to me would charge exorbitant fees for coachings or classes, when it's like, that these young actors are, working as busboys, like that's their whole paycheck, right? Like I always had an issue with that. And to me, I feel like if I wanted to make money, I would go into real estate. Not that everything gets money, right? But if my primary goal was to make money, I would trade stocks and I would go into real estate. To me, if you're working in education, especially art education, your primary focus and passion has to be mentoring young actors. You cannot be there just for a cash grab. You cannot, because people know. Like, I feel like they can feel it if that's what's going on, right? So we're really trying to create an environment of people that are just there for the right reasons, and I think we've done a good job.
Question. For the school, do you guys also have, out of curiosity, classes that are more like part-time, someone wants to drop in? Oh, tell us more.
So, now I feel like I'm doing a commercial for the school.
This is for me. I'm curious.
My boss will be very happy though that we get this in. So we have short track, we have something called VFS Connect. And this is like online short track classes. So in fact, actually, right now on Udemy, we also have a voice acting class that is co-created by myself and Marika Hendricks, who's incredible. Well, Marika Hendricks and Roger Harris. Marika's an amazing actress, done a million things. Roger Harris is director, and I'm one of the hosts of this workshop. You can do it on Udemy. It's online. You can learn. It's asynchronous, so it's not like the content exists online. You do it at your own pace. Or VFS Connect. That's done more over Zoom, and it's live classes. We have some new ones coming up.
Are there any in person by any chance?
Not yet, but soon.
I like that. Because I live a couple of blocks away. If it was in person, I'd be like, let's go.
We'll have stuff soon. Right now, we are primarily focused on building up our resources for alumni right now. But the long-term vision is to offer not just classes for our alumni, but for the broader community. This will be more evenings and weekends, because during the week we have our classes. But yeah, I want this to be a place that serves actors at all levels.
And I like, especially when you were talking on the financial and the monetary aspect. I'm living in Vancouver. I love Vancouver, but it's like,
It's
as a performer, like living downtown, it's like ka-ching, ka-ching. I lived in the West End for years. Well, my wife and I recently moved, but I work downtown, so I'm still here like every day almost. I'm very interested in voice and movement. I feel like, and improv. Things that are getting me out of my head and more in my voice and my body, more like, that kind of connection. Most recently, like just a friend of mine, just through referral, and we're kind of just like helping support each other. Like I help him on social media game and and the PR game, and he helps me, in the coaching business. But I feel like it's like forever a student. Like I can always be improving and always be growing and learning. Tell me about, I mean, we've talked about Continuum and Blue Mountain State, and tell me about some moments that you've been on set, whether it was for those shows or a different show, that you had like a moment of, OMG, this is my life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this a different reality? Like, somebody pinch me, someone wake me up. I know I've had a few of those in my life. They make me, like, I forget to eat, I'm emotional, I'm just like, I want to soak up this moment as much as possible because I'm here. I'm getting paid, my heart is exploding, and I'm in the moment, I'm present, I'm loving the people I'm with. And those are just great moments.
Sure, yeah. So the credit I'm most proud of on my resume is I've got to voice Black Panther for different Marvel shows for the past decade.
Woo!
So yeah, Marvel, Lego, I've done it for. They have animated motion comics, and there's a show on Disney XD called Marvel Superhero Adventures. So I got to do the voice of Black Panther now for a decade, even before the movie came out. And that was a moment I literally cried when my agent called. When my agent called and was like, "You booked the role," because as somebody who grew up a nerd and liking Marvel stuff, Black Panther was my guy. That was like the coolest superhero, and I knew even before the movie came out what that character meant to me and what that character meant to other young black kids that watch cartoons. Like I grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons, right? So that was definitely and to this day, whenever I get an email from my agent and like Marvel is attached to it, they're like, "You booked this thing. It's from Marvel Studios." There's always a moment where you're like, "What is my life?" You know. So that's definitely like, booking Black Panther is definitely the one.
Yeah, like I get all the union emails, and I know you're very much involved in the UBCP and committees, and whether it's through voice, through giving back, and you speak up on on my show, and I feel so grateful that I've had this opportunity to bring all these performers and artists and small business owners. And I remember like 20 years ago, I moved to Canada. It'll be 24 years in February from Pakistan, and starting out in modeling. And I remember even back then, I'd be walking down, or when you pick up a magazine, I didn't see many people of color. Or it would be like once in a blue moon, or there would be Channel M back in the day. It's not around anymore, where there was a South Asian host who brought me on the show because she saw me in an article about me, and I was like, "Oh my God, there's someone South Asian on television." There was a few other hosts like on the national television. Now there's so many more on CBC, CTV, Global. But times are changing. That now to be a person of color, now it's like the thing these days, which I'm very grateful about, and we've seen that change over the last 2 decades. And I know that's something that you're very passionate about and speak up a lot about. I would love to hear your input, as a performer, like in front of the camera and behind. I mean, you're doing voice now, but you were, before, like with the shows that you did, and when you were on stage. How do you feel like where we are today, and what it's been like over the last few decades?
Well, I feel like we've come leaps and bounds from where we started. I say this a lot because it's funny, but it's also true. If you go to IMDb, I think literally the first 2 credits on my resume are Thug Number 1 and Slave Number 2. Like, actually, it sounds like a punchline, but those were the first roles I booked, and it's like Thug Number 1, Slave Number 2. So even like getting to play like on Continuum, this scientist who was like the brains of the operations.
Smart.
Even that was like such a big departure from the roles I started off playing, and I just feel like as a writer and as an actor, there's just much more of a hunger for stories that actually represent Canada or the U.S. as we know it. Whereas when I started, it was a very limited, stereotypical vision of what people of color were and what they could do. Now we have, of course, tons of BIPOC storytellers and just more interesting stories to tell.
And so grateful for it's like we have funding for those projects, and you know, there was a time like I was so excited to live in France and have my life in Europe, but I'm like, no, as an artist, like the support that I'm getting here in Canada, like I can always go back to Europe, but I feel so supported now, and you know, it's taken like quite some time, but I'm so proud and excited that I get to see it in my time, and you know, and that's the reason why sometimes I also book jobs, and like people will tell me like I fought for you to MC this event because you know, versus you know this other person, like I saw you there and I wanted you to have the job, and I'm like, man, that feels really, really good. Tell us about some of your work as a playwright. Like, wow, that is a bit of a transition. And you know, when did you decide that you wanted to, you know, put on that hat?
Well, it's interesting. Like, I started writing plays when I moved to Vancouver, basically, and it was connected to what we're talking about. I just didn't see people who looked like me on stage in Vancouver, and I didn't see stories that represented my experience in theaters. And my dear friend and mentor, Diane Roberts, who at the time was the artistic director of a company called Urban Inc., which was actually founded by Marie Clements, who of course wrote and directed Bones of Prose, which is all over Canada right now, which I had a small role in because of my relationship with her through the theater. That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, my friend Diane was like, if you're not seeing the stories that you want to see on stage, you should write it. Like, what would you want to see? And my first play was called The Lamentable Tragedy of Sal Capone. It was a hip-hop theater piece that was inspired by the real-life shooting of this young person of color in Montreal named Freddie Villanueva. And so the play was about this hip-hop group whose DJ gets shot by the police, and it's the friends in the group dealing with the aftermath of the shooting of this kid. So that's what inspired me to start writing plays. And my latest play, my wife and I co-wrote, called Redbone Coonhound, is about language and about how like different words impact people differently, and it's inspired by our lives. Like, it's about this interracial couple, a white woman and a black man, who are out walking a dog, which we were, and this dog comes up and starts paying attention to them and sniffing them up and down, and they ask what kind of dog it is, and the name of the dog is a Redbone Coonhound, which for those listening, like, that's a real dog name. And for those who don't know, Redbone is kind of a slur in the black community where you call a mixed race black person redboned. And coon, of course, is a racial slur. It means you're a black person who's like sold out your own people for your own gain. So to me, I heard redbone and coon, and I was like, what is this dog's name? And my wife just loves dogs, and she was like, oh yeah, that's the name of a dog. So the play explores the complexity of language and how it impacts people. So most of the stuff that we write is about the world that we live in, like perspectives that we don't necessarily see on stage or on TV. So.
And I love that because now I remember I was at the Vancouver International South Asian Film Festival founded by Adam Darshi and Patricia Isaac, and it's still in the back of my brain to get into writing. I don't know where it is. I found like interviewing people and all of this, talking to them easy, but I feel like the writing part is something I need to get to, where it's like, what kind of story do you want to tell? And I was very astonished and also inspired when I saw on social media. I was like, oh wow, you're getting behind the scenes, because I remember being at this first ever Vancouver International South Asian Film Festival in 2010, and Monica Dio, who was on Much Music.
I remember Electric Circus, right?
Back in the day, and she was on this panel, and I was the red carpet host and producer, and I was interviewing like, everyone who came in, and it was maybe 25 people in the audience, and it was her and Zaf Peru and like someone else, and and having the same conversations around the Thug One and the Slave Number Two. The stuff I've always gotten was either objectifying me or with someone with an accent.
Right.
I was grateful for the job, grateful to get the credit, grateful for the nice check that I got. But I remember her saying, you're gonna have to get out there. And I felt she was speaking at me, but someone else asked the question, and she was like, you have to get out there, create the work,
It's true.
create the project,
That's true.
put yourself in it, put your friends in it. And I
Mhm.
remember thinking, how will I ever do that? I don't know how. But at least that led to me starting to host and produce and be like, I'm gonna put people in the show and have a say in it, and who I feel just, you know,
Yeah,
and,
that platform,
and
like
yeah.
amplify voice of people that you think should be heard. Yeah.
Exactly, and
Yeah.
especially more diversity, because
Sure.
I know, especially as an immigrant, and especially when English was not my first language, and like, you know, trying to cover up my accent and like
Mhm.
all these different things, and you know, it's so fantastic to see someone that I know find the success and then be in front of the camera shining, you know, as a voice actor, and then the work that you're doing at Vancouver Film School and getting behind. What advice would you give to someone, like actors or performers who are watching, other than going to VFS? What advice would you give to them, like as if you were talking to the young Omari at like 18, you know, that you would give to the young Omari?
I would say, you know, you should have the curiosity and the humility to keep learning, but also the confidence to know that the people who are currently doing it aren't much smarter than you. They don't have some supernatural talent that you cannot also have. They've just put in more work and they've understood the craft more, and you can get there if you put the work in. Because I think a lot of people of color in particular internalize this idea that we're not good enough, or that this is like rocket science and how could we ever do this, and it's not true. Like I feel like if you get the opportunity and you make the most of it and you put the work and you put your reps in, you can do anything. Just sometimes for reasons that maybe your family couldn't afford to send you to art school. Maybe you had to work instead of you couldn't just focus on your audition because you had to go to work or whatever. Just know that you're good enough and you're smart enough to accomplish whatever you want. You just might have not have had the opportunity yet. And if you really want it and you keep at it, you can adjust the conditions so that you can take advantage of those opportunities. That's kind of a long answer.
No, I love that. That leads me to, would you say you've always been a very confident person? I find like when I speak to a lot of like whether small business owners or artists, whether it is someone who paints or draws or writes or performs, you know, there's always that inner critic. I know for me, my inner critic, depending on, you know, what I'm doing, like in the moment I can be like, oh my god, this is great, and then afterwards I'm like, I could have done this and this and this. Like I love asking people how they deal with that inner voice, the inner critic that comes up. Like what is there? Is it like journaling or meditation or workout or running or self-talk or just like pretending it doesn't exist? Like how do you deal with that inner critic, especially as a performer?
Right.
And with rejection, you know, the amount of rejection performers receive.
Right. So it's kind of a funny answer.
It's a big
No, but okay. In the past, I've answered this question that I've named specific shows, but I'm not going to name specific shows. But I'm going to make my point specifically, right? Everybody knows the types of shows that shoot in Vancouver. I'm not going to name them, but we know there's certain networks that do things very quickly, and the quality of their shows is questionable. I remember even when I was doing extra work, I'd be on set doing these shows, and I had enough honesty with myself to be like, this person is not doing anything that I can't do. This is not rocket science, right? Now, if I was on set with Daniel Day-Lewis or Meryl Streep, I'm sure I'd be my mind, but I was like, this is not rocket science, right? So I remember just with my own two eyes being objective and watching work that was happening and knowing the disparity in pay between me doing background and this person, I'm like, this is not a magician, I can do this, right? So that gave me the confidence, because I was there on set, watching their work, to know that if I got the opportunity, I could also do that, right? Does that answer the question?
It totally does answer the question. So it required like, but also some self-talk and like conviction inside of you to be like, yes, like I've had those things too, and I've also had things where I get envious, and I have to be like, okay, my time is going to come. and I'm going to do things that are going to make me proud, or I'm going to put myself in places and situations where I'm going to have wins, or creating like my own thing. So for example, if you're up for a job and they're saying you're pinned, they really want you, and then the call comes, oh sorry, they decided to go with this. How do you deal with that? I'll tell you how I deal with it, and then I would love to hear your answer.
Well, at this point in my career, I don't really care. And okay, I'm gonna get philosophical and a bit dark.
Go ahead, I like it. Tell me.
My favorite comedian of all time is Norm Macdonald, right? I love Norm Macdonald. May he rest in peace. And I don't think he made up this quote, but I saw him say this in an interview, and it's true. And it's very liberating. But if you believe that the universe is infinite, right? Like the world will continue to go on long after I'm done, after you're done, after anything and everything, any fraction of time measured against infinity equals zero. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, even if I live to 100 years old, 100 years, when put next to infinity, which the universe is zero. It's nothing. And if you, it's gonna sound funny and kind of dark, but if you walk around knowing that, how insignificant and inconsequential all of this is, what a miracle it is that we're even here, right? That we're in this room right now, that you've got this money to do the show, I got this job here. We're all blessed all the time to even be here. We're specks in the universe. Everything becomes kind of funny, and you just kind of try to live in the present and enjoy the experience. That's how I do it. So I'm like, I didn't get a job, cool. There's not a war happening right now in my city. I have food.
And you woke up today.
I woke up today.
Yeah. I mean, I love to ask people this question. Like, I have days where I've been doing this like gratitude journal for the last 5 years. You know, it started out with this email chain that I'm in with friends from Paris. And then also like here I have like a written where I do it, and you know, sometimes it's like, I'm like, oh my God, like I kind of live higher up and I can see the clouds and the mountain and the ocean. Like, oh my God. And then there's days where I don't feel like that. And it is the reality of life. There are days where I'm like, man, like, you know, at this time in my life, when I was in my 20s, like I should be like, you know, but then I have days, like to be honest, I've had a really good year. I feel very, very blessed.
That's awesome.
Inside of me, I feel like I've been doing the things that I love. But even amongst that, there's peaks and valleys, right? So I love to know, like, of course, that is a great, great way of thinking.
Yeah.
But is there like a practice? I don't know if you know, I used to teach yoga. I was kind of like a yogi for a while. I cut off my hair. I was in Bali studying yoga. I went to Vipassana and married, meditating like 10, 11 hours a day. You know, I have like little things that I like to do that I'm like, okay, come back to the breath, which is kind of like yours. So I want to hear from you, is there a practice that you like to do when things aren't super 100%? Which is, you know, perhaps like not looking at a job maybe doesn't affect you anymore. But maybe on a day, on a certain day, if it does, what do? Do you call up a friend? Do you,
well, I mean, to be clear, like, obviously I get depressed sometimes, like everyone gets depressed. But I honestly, like, comedy, I listen to a lot of comedy. Like, I really like, I find that really helps. And I just, when I'm feeling down, I try to return to gratitude and return to perspective. You know, you turn on the news and you see there are many, many places where daily existence is hell. Hell. For a number of reasons, for lack of food, lack of resources, war. So when I'm feeling down, I try to zoom out and reflect on all the things I have to be grateful for. And then again, sometimes when I really zoom out and picture like how small the earth is in the scale of the universe, it just makes me laugh because it's all so silly.
And it's so true, and your perspective was truly, truly valid. Like, it's really, really, you know, and it's like, there was a time like I was like, no, I'm like peachy keen all the time, or at least through social media, versus inside I'd be going through things, versus now it's like, here, I like talking about that stuff because I think it's like a very human emotion, like the spectrums, and especially when we are the ones putting ourselves out there. And, you know, it's taken me time to be like, okay, that audition was great. I didn't get a call back. I thought that was a great moment. You know, I paid money for this coaching. You know, it was a great,
Yeah,
but you
yeah.
know, I never thought that I would just enjoy auditioning. Like,
Right,
you know,
yeah.
and it's like, this is gonna sound funny, and like, it's only over the last 2 years that I'm like, wow, like, I'm just enjoying like this.
Process, yeah.
Yeah, because I'm like, I kind of grew in this. I did some work here that I didn't think that I could do.
Yeah.
And I grew, and like, okay, now I'm gonna rip it, and I'm also gonna delete this in here.
Right.
Because there was a time I would keep them because I'm
Yes.
like, look at this, and then
Yeah.
also feel terrible about not getting a call back. Forget booking, but I'm like getting.
Listen, we've all been on those. Listen, when I was doing extra work, you know, and working the graveyard shift at my gym. I don't know if you remember that. I used to work the graveyard shift at
Fitness World?
at Fitness World. Yeah, I definitely.
But I didn't know you worked the graveyard shift. I didn't know.
Oh yeah. I worked from 9 p.m. until 6 a.m. And I'm sure back then, if I had a call back, I was checking my phone every 2 seconds to see if I got it, right?
Refresh.
I'm sure, but I'm 44. You know, like, God forbid, if I never am on set again, or if tomorrow that's the end of the journey, my last thought will be how lucky I was. That's how I feel right now. Like, that I feel like I've been so blessed in my life and career that I don't really stress out about the other stuff now. Like, you know, like oftentimes people are like, oh, like, when I get to do this, I'll be happy. Like, I feel like I'm doing the things that I want to be doing now. You know?
It kind of sounds like, you know, going back to the philosophical, what you were saying, you're almost like in a path of least resistance, you know, and like yogic philosophy, or like Deepak Chopra's like Laws of Success book. You know, I read a lot of that kind of stuff, you know, and he will talk about is like, the less you resist, because that's almost you trying to push to make something happen, versus when you're in the flow, when you're allowing things to happen, because there's a flow and time for things, you know,
totally.
which it sounds like you're in a very content place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also just tired because I work all the time. So maybe that's what it is. But I just feel like, I don't know. I don't have a like, if I win an Oscar, I'll feel like I made it. Or if I win a I don't have that. I've never really had that, right? My ambitions are more about like freedom and mental peace, and I don't know. That might sound a little new agey, but
No, mental peace is like, it's something. I was speaking to a friend of mine who was one of the main makeup artists of a show that was filming even before the strike ended. And you know, I was having this conversation that I really feel like peace is the goal. Like at 41, like you know, I think something shifts. People talk about it, but something did shift for me at 40. I had a job in between auditioning and creative work I was doing, and I woke up one day after a long weekend having a feeling of like I just turned 40. It was like a month after, and having this feeling of like, what am I doing? Like, you know, I don't want the fail-safe thing. I want to risk it all, and like the idea for me, you know, and it's like, before that I consulted, just been freelance all these years, but just during COVID, I got something that I was like, okay, this is adulting now, because you know, I'm XYZ age, versus listening to the calling of my heart, which perhaps when I was younger may have been around the fame and all of that, versus now I feel like it was more in line with, I just want to be a creative person in general.
Well, it's, I don't know if you think the same way, but it's also like, when I started, I'll say we, because we're around the same age, we started pre-social media, right? Let me know if we're at time.
MySpace, there was MySpace.
There was MySpace.
Yeah,
but like,
or starting out,
just
starting.
But nobody in the 90s, when they had a dream to be a creative or be an actor, was thinking about followers or influence.
Yeah.
And I know that now this sounds like some real back in my day shit, but it's true, right? When I started acting, my heroes were De Niro and Pacino, and I wanted to like transform. So it's also the business has changed so much too, that I don't actually know if I would pursue an acting career. If I was 18 now, I don't know if I would pursue an acting career. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very different business than it was when I started. I'm very blessed. I'm happy that I'm in it. But part of the reason I pivoted to voice is because I feel like voice is still about the craft and the art form versus all the other things that go with TV that I'm not all that interested in.
And going back to voice, which I found, like, you know, I feel like I've dabbled and done things like here and there this year, and it's just been so. A part of it was, this doesn't matter. Like, I'm bringing my experience.
Totally.
I'm bringing my life experience, my, you know, it's like they're bringing me in for, and that felt really freeing.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best. Not that, again, by the way, if any casting or watching, if you want to give me a series regular, I will take it. Don't take this wrong way. I just don't want to disrupt my entire life to try and get it. If it comes my way, I'm happy to have it. I'm good if it doesn't though.
But we're available for work. Ready and willing to work. We talked about his age, and he's with characters, ready to rock and roll.
I'm a red management. Shout out Murray Gibson. He's amazing. I'm a red management for principal.
For principal, Omari, this has been so lovely. Before I let you go, I love asking everyone who comes on the show this. And this may sound, again, new agey.
Sure.
Because we are new agey over here.
Yeah.
My first production company was called Inspired Life. The show I did earlier this year was called The Inspired Life Vancouver. I love hearing different people's perspective in what inspires you in life. What inspires you to jump out of the bed in the morning? What inspires you on a good day, on a bad day?
I feel like I'm inspired by people, of course. I'm inspired by great works of art, like a great movie, a great album, a great song even. I'm inspired by people who create things without cynicism. Like people who create things not for profit, not for clout, not for fame, but because they have a unique perspective they want to share, and they're creating something original that hasn't been done before. That's what inspires me, whether that's art or a great meal or, people who create things with integrity and honesty.
From the soul.
From the soul, exactly.
Yeah. That's a great way to end the show. Well,
there we go.
Thank you so much for walking out in the rain.
My pleasure.
And, you know, we're happy to lend you an umbrella if you need to go back.
It's all right.
And Omari Newton, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm your host, Zara Durrani. If you felt inspired, make sure to let us know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon.